Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be going over what I consider to be the best Rank 1 ground vehicles in War Thunder. Hopefully this video will help new players find vehicles and tech trees that they enjoy, as well as also be an interesting topic of discussion for more seasoned players. I have included a single premium on this list, but kind of two, as I feel that these are both so good that I couldn't help but mention them. Other than that, this is all about regular tech tree vehicles that are accessible to everyone. With that said, let's get into it. Now to start, the M3 and M3A1 Stewart. While the M3 and M3A1 Stewart are two different tanks in the tech tree, I will kind of blend them into one here, but also split them up when needed. Now these are probably the most balanced tanks on this list, as they have fairly good armor, good speed, a good cannon, and a good reload. Personally, I feel that the M3, so the standard M3, is better at 1.7 BR, but they're both very usable. These vehicles are great early vehicles to learn on, as they can do pretty much everything that you could want in a tank, though the 2.3 BR M3A1 will definitely struggle in up tiers, as the armor and cannon are typically best through 2.3 BR, which is where the M3A1 currently sits. Further, both the M3 and M3A1 feature a stabilizer, which goes a long way towards being accurate while moving at somewhat low speeds. Now for the next entry on this list, and bear in mind I will try to make each entry fairly quick, and this list is in no particular order. These are just the vehicles that I feel are in general the best, though of course I'll mention the one that I feel is really the best. With that said, the LVT-A1 takes the second entry on this list. Now of course this is another American tank, but it's a bit different than the M3 Stewarts, in that this is a reserve tank and will only be placed against 2.0 BR tanks at max, unless of course you put your lineup to include higher BR tanks than the LVT itself. And if you guys want to learn about lineups, I'll try to include a link below about that, but if I don't, just remind me in the comments. Regardless, this vehicle is still quick enough to get around, but more importantly, features an improved M6 cannon from the M3A1, and also has a large 6-man crew with an extremely cavernous interior. This means that despite having minimal armor, this vehicle will typically take a ton of hits before it dies, as people, especially new players, will have difficulty pinpointing where to hit in order to kill the surviving crew. Also, the LVT-A1 features a stabilizer that will make firing on the move, albeit at fairly low speeds, fairly accurate. Now for the third entry on this list, again, in no particular order, I've got the Panzer II F. The Panzer II F is a radical departure from the aforementioned American tanks. While it has a stabilizer, it isn't as good as those tanks, but will at least allow you to fire accurately at fairly low speeds. More importantly, while this is a higher BR than the Panzer II-C, the F variant features almost double the frontal armor on both the hull and the turret, as well as slightly increased armor pretty much everywhere else on this tank, all while maintaining the same exact low weight. This means that the Panzer II F is fast, and when combined with its 20mm autocannon that has a substantially higher rate of fire than what's found on the C variant, you will be able to learn flanking on this vehicle like no other. It is fantastic for pelting low BR vehicles and stays low enough at 1.7 BR where it's not going to be up tiered all the time, thus making it usable as a capper and flanker in nearly all of its matches. Now for the fourth entry, I've got the Panzer III F. Again, the Panzer III F is fairly dissimilar from the aforementioned vehicles, with the Stewart functioning as light tanks, the LVT being some unholy abomination, and the Panzer II F being kind of a good idea of flanking. The Panzer III F is essentially an early medium tank that really plays as such. This vehicle has a decent amount of armor at 1.3 BR, while carrying a very effective 50mm cannon that has explosive filler, or if you need, high penning APCR ammunition that will be able to pen well in excess of 100mm of armor. It also has a good power to weight ratio, which means that it will allow you to be mobile on the battlefield. This for me beats out the Panzer IIIJ variant, because in my mind the extra armor on that vehicle is not nearly worth the full 1 BR increase over the F variant, which is why the F variant is in this video as one of the best tanks of rank 1. Now for my next entry, I kind of have a similar situation of what I had with the M3 and the M3A1 Stewart. For this entry, we have the BT7 and the BT7M. I kind of have to include both of these on here, but for different reasons. For one, the BT-7 is absolutely awesome at
1 point thrizzle.
BR, being one of the best rank 1 tanks easily, with a very good cannon, great reload speed, and excellent maneuverability. The BT-7M, of which is also rank 1, has a marginally better armor layout, but more importantly, has an extra 100 horsepower over the standard BT-7, while only weighing about a half ton more. While it arguably is just slightly worse at 2.0 BR compared to the BT-7 at 1.3 BR, the 7M is even more uptierable, being used as both an early base capper and a troll vehicle very commonly at higher tiers, as it has a cannon capable of damaging or even destroying higher BR light tanks and even some MBTs with well-placed shots. Now with that being said, for the next entry on this list, I've got the British A13 Mark II. This vehicle has smoke grenades, a good cannon and reload speed, great maneuverability, and a stabilizer. This is somewhat like the British version of the M3 Stewarts, with the main drawback being poor armor, though the A13 Mark II at least has somewhat better frontal hull armor with 30mm as opposed to 14mm on the Mark I, which should limit some autocannons from penning you. This upgrade alone, in my opinion, makes the Mark II better at 1.3 BR than the Mark I at reserve, though they're pretty interchangeable, at least to me. Overall, as mentioned before, these are actually very similar to the Stewarts, although even faster, but you have to make sure that you understand that the highest penning shells of the A13, both the Mark I and II, lack explosive filler, which will limit post-pen damage. Now for the next tank on this list, we have the D2. This is a French tank that is currently 1.3 BR. This vehicle, despite having poor speed, has an amazing 18 degrees of cannon depression, great armor, a good cannon, good reload, and a stabilizer. The meta around this BR is decent armor pen, fast fire rate, and speed, and while of course the D2 does not have speed, it actually works with having more armor than most tanks that it will face. If played right, this duck will be invulnerable to most that it will face, at least from the front. And as we're kind of nearing the end of this list, if you guys haven't already picked it up, of course these are all relative to BRs, because I could just say the highest BR rank 1 tanks are the best, but in my opinion the tanks selected are best relative to their peers at their own BR. Now with that being said, the next one on this list, and this makes a very strong case for number 1, but I'll just say the Stridsvagen M39 and the M38. Now I accidentally said in the intro that there will only be one premium vehicle on this list. There is a second one, and I guess this is the first one that I'll mention, being the M39, but alas, the M39 and the M38 are very similar. Now these vehicles have as much firepower as the M40L, and although they have far worse hull armor than the M40L, it isn't completely necessary, especially when playing to their strengths. Because of this, I feel that the M39 and the M38 are better as reserve vehicles, and I guess 1.0 BR, than the M40L is at 2.0 BR. Additionally, the M39 has much better turret armor than the M38 for only about 0.1 tons more of weight, though again, they essentially are able to do about the same exact role, although the M39, if you want to pay for the premium, will do it a touch better. Unfortunately, this vehicle, or both of these vehicles rather, do not have stabilizers like so many other tanks at and around this BR, but in my opinion, it's not necessary, as those typically only work at very low speeds anyways. If I haven't already mentioned it, this vehicle, despite sitting at 1.0 BR and reserve, both have access to APDS shells with over 100mm of armor pen, which essentially guarantees a pen against enemy tanks unless the shell ricochets or, for whatever reason, shatters. That fact alone makes it one of the best tanks of tier 1, even if the vehicle carrying the shells is simply pretty decent in and of itself. The only issue is that the APDS are tiny and thus do minimal post-pen damage, though of course it is still excellent if you know where to hit. If looking for guaranteed pens, the M38 and 39 are where you're going to want to go. We are getting near the end here, so next up we have the SARC Mark IV-A. This is a British vehicle that currently sits at 1.3 BR, rank 1, and is essentially everything that you could want in a rank 1 vehicle, outside of course, armor. It is very uptierable with high armor pen, good movement speed, and a great reload speed, making this a surprisingly good ambusher, flanker, capper, and pretty much everything else that you need outside of brawling. It's a very good vehicle if you want to learn how to flank in War Thunder. Now with that being said, before we we get to number 1, I'll just go over 2 honorable mentions really quick. First, we have the BT-42. This is a Swedish 1.7 BR vehicle. While it is a bit of a meme vehicle, the BT-42 is a hell of a light tank that, while heavier than the other BT tank cousins, is still plenty fast and can blast enemies with its excellent 114mm howitzer. This would likely not be an honorable mention, but rather on this list if it had a faster reload rate and essentially an easier to use cannon, as its muzzle velocity is fairly poor and it may be difficult for beginners to learn. But the BT-42 can be a ton of fun, so much so that, aside from the Kachi, it may actually be the most fun vehicle in this video. Hint, hint. Now for the second honorable mention, we have the M8 LAC. A lot of people may have an issue with me putting this here, but the M8 LAC, at least in my opinion, is a fantastic vehicle that, while lightly armored and with an open turret, has excellent speed and a great cannon, which, for me at least, means that it can quickly strike, cap, and flank enemies, taking advantage of the typically slow turret traverse speeds of enemies at this BR. The great thing is that, while the M8 LAC in the American Ground Forces tech tree is currently a very rare and expensive vehicle on the War Thunder marketplace, it is in the regular tech tree as a reserve vehicle for the Chinese tank tech tree. Plus, it has a 50 cal HMG on top that may as well be an autocannon at this BR because it can pen most tanks from the side, leading to plenty of kills if done correctly. Now with that being said, I've pretty much already said it, but the Kachi is number 1, and this is definitely number 1. While the other ones you can put in whatever order you want, the Kachi is number 1. This is probably my favorite low BR vehicle in War Thunder, and I don't even think it's close. This is a 2.0 BR rank 1 tank. It is huge, has tons of crew, tons of space in the tank, incredible survivability, and a pretty good cannon that can mostly one-shot enemies. Plus, of course, a good reload, but it has a mediocre-ish movement speed. In short, this is kind of like the LVT A1 that I mentioned earlier, except on steroids. Similar to the LVT, this is a large amphibious vehicle with a large cavernous interior that can take a ton of shots. That's pretty much where the similarities end. This is not only the best Japanese rank 1 vehicle by a mile, but it's one of the best rank 1 vehicles in all of War Thunder's history. When equipped with its pontoons up front, the Kachi is essentially invulnerable to all HE and heat shells at this BR from the front, as it acts like 300mm of spaced armor. Even if the Kachi is penned, it has 7 crew members that are incredibly spaced out inside of the vehicle, limiting damage. Plus, while not incredibly powerful, the cannon is still good enough to be able to pen most tanks if you know their weak spots, as these shells have HE filler inside. In short, the Kachi is a beast, and is one of the most ridiculous vehicles ever put into War Thunder. This vehicle needs to be given to players once again. I don't even care if this is given as a vehicle reward for one of the next summer events. It needs to be, even though it's already been given. I would love to have more people have this vehicle. But that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I know I said initially that there'd be 1 premium vehicle. Technically there were 2, but of course I said both the M38 and M39 for the Swedish, so hopefully it doesn't upset everybody, but they're more or less about the same vehicle, so it doesn't really matter anyways. But either way, thanks again, and I will see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.